We continue our conversation now with Joseph Pinion in New York, a businessman, philanthropist. And Mr. Pinion, this is a president who ran as someone who was going to drain the swamp. And then on Thursday, we find out that his chief strategist, Mr. Bannon, has been arrested and charged with fraud, defrauding hundreds of thousands of people in a build the wall scheme. His campaign manager goes to prison. His deputy campaign manager goes to prison. His advisor has to be commuted, his sentence commuted. Some people say this is not draining the swamp, this is filling the swamp.
Look, I think realistically, if you're looking at the trajectory that we're on here, I've told many people, the presidency itself is too big to jail. But the people around the president most assuredly can find themselves in prison. And I think in the case of this administration, there are many people who have run afoul of the law. And I think that if people believe that this will end on November 3rd, I think irrespective of who is victorious on that day, we are at the beginning of what I anticipate will be a great many other people who will have their day in court for one reason or the next. So I think if we're just going to be talking honestly and starkly about where we are as a nation, the fact of the matter is we found ourselves in this place where it's very difficult for the average American to trust the people that are in power and to trust that there will be accountability, whether you're talking about on the streets in places like George Floyd, or whether you're talking about the people in power on Capitol Hill and the people that surround the people on Capitol Hill, doing what is always in the best interest of the people.
Can I throw a number out at you, which is 8? 8 years of the nation's first black president. And being a journalist in Washington, I can tell you, every investigative reporter on the face of the planet was digging. And we were looking for everything that you could possibly imagine. He became known as No Drama Obama. We went 8 years without a scandal. Never have seen that in Washington. We didn't make it 4 weeks in the Trump administration without there being a scandal. So as a businessman, would you have kept this person on if he were working for you?
Well, look, I think if you're just to push back a little bit, I mean, I think there were certainly scandals of a different kind. I think
give me one.
Is for well, there's the Fast and the Furious scandal, which is pretty scandalous. I think
predated the Obama administration. It was Eric Holder.
To be clear, I think that what we're confronting right now with the Trump administration is the type of calamity as it comes to public trust that we've never experienced before. And so I think that is why it is so jarring.
Yeah, they were guilty. They were guilty. In the case of Roger Stone, convicted by a jury of his peers. In the case of Flynn, he admitted his guilt.
I think most people that you talk to who are reasonable, who are not giving you talking points, will concede that most of these individuals were guilty of what they were accused of. And I think, again, the fact that there has not been accountability for these parties in some cases because they've either been, for one reason or another, let off the hook or had their sentences commuted or simply had their behavior ignored is troubling and concerning, not just for us from a political standpoint, but for the fabric of the republic. So I think that is clear. I just think, again, if you're talking about the fact that there was no scandal, no drama Obama, that is true in some ways. The nature of the drama that happened under President Obama was more palatable for the American people because it did not necessarily deal with a direct attack on the full faith and credit, the trust of the American people. So I think that I will agree with you on that, but I just think that, there is certain levels of political, I guess, division that is acceptable. What is happening right now, I think, without a shadow of a doubt, is certainly not acceptable when it comes to the level of smoke and corruption that has surrounded the administration.
So when do we get to the point where we stop saying surrounded the administration and say President Trump? I mean, let's be realistic. If this man were working for you, I go back to the question, which, by the way, you did not answer. If this man were working for you, would you have fired him?
Well, here's the truth. The world doesn't work that way.
Yes, it does.
I think
yes, it does.
We just have to understand that. I think it's a false premise. The reality is that we don't put presidents in jail, but that does not mean that the person who becomes president cannot go to jail. I think President Trump, if he is guilty of all the things that people allege him to have been done, he will have his day in court. There are state attorney generals all across this country who have case files on President Trump for one reason or another, be it his foundations, be it any of these other things. If he is in fact guilty, I can guarantee you that this will not be another case of Nixon being pardoned. He will have his day in court, both state and most likely federal, because we all also know that there are pending cases in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District that were pending. So again, I think this notion that somehow that this is just going to end, that either President Trump wins or he loses and he builds a presidential library and we're done here, I think that's a fallacy. So I think that people have a difficulty in making the distinction between a lack of justice and justice delayed on the fact that we have a republic and a system of government which dictates that the President of the United States cannot be indicted for crimes and cannot be placed in prison unless they're removed from office.
Put it on a scale that black folk understand real well. If Donald Trump were black, would he be in prison now?
I think the hard truth is that we always know that black people have been held to a different standard.
That's another one of those yes or no questions.
That is why I think Jackie Robinson was the first person to play in Major League Baseball as opposed to somebody like Satchel Paige or Josh Gibson. I think it's why you have somebody like Barack Obama who became the first black president as opposed to many of the other people who were obviously qualified.
It's still a yes or no question.
We're definitely held to a different standard. I think without question, if the person in the Oval Office was melanin and some of the things that were alleged had been alleged, they probably would no longer be in the Oval Office. I think we just have to be honest about that. I don't think that is up for debate even. So yes, I think that we have to be honest about that fact. But the fact remains is that the person that's in the Oval Office is not melanated. And America, in many ways, has never gone to the polls in mass to cure itself of any racial remedy. So if that happens this year, then that will be, a historic event. But that notwithstanding, I think, again, we're asking the wrong questions, because the questions we need to be asking are, what are the policies that are going to come out of either of these administrations? And what do we think we should be doing as a nation to ensure that or even as a community of black people, that if we are unhappy with the outcomes that are coming out of an administration, that we never find ourselves in this type of position again. And because I think ultimately, if we get in this back and forth, it becomes very difficult, I think, for people to follow the thread.
We are on the same page, and when we come back, we'll talk about what it is that Black America should be demanding of both parties. Mr. Pinion, thanks for being with us. We'll be right back. Stay with us.